play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and I'm making this video in response to a comment on one of my latest battle reports, the Necrons vs. Chaos Space Marines. And this is a video that I'm going to use to teach you about blasts and line of sight, something that is often misunderstood. So here is the comment. Autopilot says, "You are using blast slightly wrong," which is very common. Blasts hit everything under the marker, and you roll to wound based on how many you hit, even out of line of sight, but you can only kill what you can see. It's allocated like a normal shooting attack, and there is no special rule allowing you to kill what you can't see. Now normally that would sound like something I could agree to, if it weren't made clear in the rulebook and in the errata that Games Workshop put out. So let's take a look at the situation and find out the correct ruling to this exact rule. Here is a situation you might find yourself in. Now in the game that I played, it was a Chaos Space Marine Vindicator, not a Leman Russ tank. Now I want to clarify first off, some people thought that the Vindicator's weapon is Barrage, and it is not. It is Ordnance Large Blast. So the Ordnance has nothing to do with what you can kill in and out of line of sight. The Barrage blast weapons have a whole different ruling, which we are not going to cover in this video. So for our intents and purposes, the Leman Russ tank will work just fine, as it has a blast weapon on it. So let's take a look at the Necron warriors from the point of view of the tank. As you can see, the Leman Russ is able to see a Necron warrior from that squad. So he is able to target that Necron warrior with a blast. The rule for placing blast templates is that they have to be placed within the range of your weapon. The center of the blast has to be within the range of the weapon and on a model in line of sight. And the exception to that, of course, is Barrage, which we're not covering in this video. Of course, the players are aware of what models are being hidden, and so they might be wanting to get a lucky shot. So, for example, in this one, he'll actually want the blast marker to deviate. So firing the blast weapon is simple. We place the center of the blast template over top of the model he can see, and we roll for scatter. In this case, it's scattering the wrong way. I'm going to fudge this so that it actually scatters where we want it to go. So it's going to scatter 8 inches minus the ballistic skill of the tank operator, which in this case is 3. So it will move 5 inches in this direction. This places the blast template over 4 models. You can't necessarily see it from that angle, but you look at it top down, and I'm covering 4 models. So we have 2 questions we're going to answer here. The first is, can the Leman Russ's blast hurt models out of line of sight? And the second question is, if yes, do they get a cover save? And I guess there would be a third question that's part of that second question, and that is, what cover save would they get? Referring to the Warhammer 40k rulebook, we read this under the blast and large blast rules. Once the final position of the blast marker has been determined, take a good look at it from above. The unit suffers 1 hit for each model with its base fully or partially beneath the blast marker. Once the number of hits inflicted on the unit has been worked out, roll to wound and save as normal. Any unsaved wounds are then allocated on the unit as for a normal shooting attack. Now, if we look at all the rules for a normal shooting attack, it says that you are not allowed to kill models out of line of sight. In the errata that Games Workshop posted for their rulebook, they added the following. Add to the end of the final paragraph, remember to keep the wounds inflicted by weapons with the blast special rule in their own wound pool, and that wounds from this pool can be allocated to the closest model in the target unit, even if it is out of line of sight of any models from the attacking unit. So that right there pretty much clarifies it, but just to make it really clear, they added a question to the FAQ portion of the 40k rulebook, errata and FAQ, that says the following. Question. Can blast markers hit a model that is not in the attacker's line of sight if they do not scatter? Answer, yes, as long as the target enemy model for the blast weapon is within the firer's line of sight. So here we have Games Workshop clarifying 2 things. 1, yes, a blast template's weapon can hurt models out of line of sight and remove them as they would any other casualties. And 2, they can do this even if the shot doesn't scatter. In other words, if we got a direct hit over top of the one Necron warrior and there was a warrior beside him but out of line of sight, that one could be hurt as well. This means that even an entire unit that is out of line of sight, such as these Necron Lich Guard, could be damaged by this weapon if you got really lucky with the scatter. For example, if we rolled this, scatter in that direction, with a 2d6 being rolled as a 12, we subtract a ballistic skill of 3, and that 12 becomes 9. We measure, and sure enough, the blast goes 9 inches and covers one of these Lich Guard and none of the warriors. And so we would roll to hit, or sorry, to wound against the Necron Lich Guard, just like we would against the Warriors. Of course, once it comes time for wounds to be allocated and saves to be made, you still go the nearest model to the attacking unit. In other words, this Lich Guard would die first, then this guy, and finally this guy. So now that we've determined that yes, those models out of line of sight can both be hit and wounded, the question is, what kind of cover save would they get, if any? For that, we'll turn to the rulebook under cover saves and read the following. Determining cover saves. If, when you come to allocate a wound, the target model's body, as defined on page 8, is at least 25% obscured from the point of view of at least one firer, wounds allocated to that model receive a cover save. Now, from the point of view of the Leman Russ, this warrior is not 25% covered, and everybody else is 100% covered. It said at least 25% covered, and so these other guys will definitely get cover saves. The next question is, what kind of cover save? To answer that question, we'll need to continue reading in the main rulebook. Types of cover saves. The type of cover save a model receives depends on exactly what he is sheltering behind. For example, a soft obstacle like a bloodthorn hedge that would hide soldiers behind it but would not even slow down enemy shots confer a 6+ cover save. Purpose-built fortifications confer a 3+ cover save, and most other things confer 4+ or 5+. In other words, whatever is blocking the model from the fire is what confers the cover save. And since when we trace a line from the attacker to the things that he's wounding, we have to go through this building. And buildings, as we know, confer a 4+ cover save. So in this case, these models who are out of line of sight would receive a 4+ cover save. This is kind of wonky because you wouldn't really expect a blast that scatters over here to actually allow anybody to have a cover save. And so a lot of people will do it wrong because logically, or just kind of looking at it abstractly, it doesn't make much sense. But this is a miniature war game with rules that are trying to create an abstract concept for something that might happen in real life. And so it's not always going to make sense. And for that case, they have to make rules that'll kind of work in every situation, not something that requires a bajillion special rules, such as when it's out of line of sight. So resolving the wounds and saves on these Necron warriors, saying that they did get hit by the blast and it covered 4 of them, so they were hit 4 times. Well, the first thing we have to do is see how many wounds that inflicts. Well, the Demolisher Cannon, or even this Plasma Cannon, is going to be high enough strength that you have to roll 2s in order to wound. So let's see how many wounds we do. So I get very unlucky and roll 2 1s. So 2 wounds are inflicted. Now, as for all shooting attacks, you start to allocate these to the closest model, one at a time, and then applying any cover saves. So the closest model first is this guy. Even though the blast scattered over here, it doesn't matter. We still allocate to the closest guy. He is the closest. He is not in cover, so he automatically dies because the AP of both these weapons is high enough that he does not get an armor save. So that is one of the wounds gone. The second wound is allocated to the next closest model, who is out of line of sight and therefore will get a 4+ cover save. And he survives. I hope that clarifies that special scenario that happens somewhat often, but not often enough that everybody's going to be very familiar with that rule. If you have any suggestions or questions about this specific tutorial, go ahead and post them in the comments below. If you disagree with anything I said, please let me know, in case there actually was something I got wrong there, although I did my due diligence and read through all the rules and read an FAQ, and I'm 99.9999999% sure that that is correct. And the reason I don't say 100% is because, you know, the way that the rules are written for Warhammer 40K, sometimes they don't always have an absolute answer. And so I'll defer to that 0.0000001% on the off chance that there's something wrong. But I am very confident that I was correct. Go ahead and read the rule book just like I did. Look at the errata and the FAQ, and let me know what you think below. Stay tuned for more how to play and more tutorials. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Happy wargaming.